After Resident Evil 3's release and success in 1999, another installment that was released the following year on February 3rd exclusively to the Sega Dreamcast was titled Code Veronica. Ever since Code Veronica was released, I've been wanting this game to be appreciated more. And I'm not saying that through the lenses of someone who is obsessed. I'm somebody that understood why this game was meant to be made and why it should have initially been Resident Evil 3. I understood that this wasn't just any installment, but a very important chapter in Chris and Claire Redfield's story. A very important story that's remained completely unresolved and forgotten since its release. But I think that now enough time has passed for this game to finally receive the appreciation and audiences it's well deserved. The first important thing to understand about Code Veronica's story is that it's starring Claire Redfield. Claire Redfield was one of the main protagonists of Resident Evil 2, but was entirely optional since Leon Kennedy was advertised being the main protagonist. That didn't stop some people from immediately playing the game as her, because she could easily replace Leon Kennedy and still present a very interesting story. Leon Kennedy was heavily marketed, but I personally believe that Claire Redfield should have taken the lead, because a lot of the things that she does in this story is absolutely taking the lead, more than anything that Leon was accomplishing. It's simply implausible to misjudge Code Veronica's story without playing Resident Evil 2 as Claire and walking into this installment not realizing how much of a significant impact they simultaneously have. But that's what makes it historically vital and debatable. Because while there's certain things to praise about it, it's also been treated as one of the black sheeps of the series. Simply because there's people that believe that it's a completely outdated experience despite the time of its release. But their biggest complaint that perplexed and bothered the hell out of me was towards its storytelling. It gives players more context about what happened after Claire Redfield left Raccoon City. The second installment wasn't just about her surviving the events of Raccoon City, but also finding her brother Chris, who wasn't just only an important character in the first installment, but a former and surviving member of the STARS team. In the first installment, the STARS team was violently sabotaged in many ways, but Chris, along with a few other allies, managed to escape. Even so, Chris is nowhere to be found in the second game, except leaving behind suspicious notes that obviously says that something else is going on. But we don't know about these events until Code Veronica. Claire attempts to continue finding her brother Chris, but unfortunately becomes apprehended and taken to an island called Rockfort. But her adventure doesn't stop there, because she's introduced to other characters, as well as various zombies and monsters. She immediately learns that Umbrella has everything to do about what happened about Rockfort Island, because not only do they own Rockfort Island, but have been pursuing a lot of experiments that have caused plenty of devastating outcomes. Or at least that's what it seems, until later in the story, when a familiar character from the first installment that was presumed dead somehow makes a surprising return, directly and physically at Claire's expense. As the story progresses, it becomes clearer that it's not just any continuation, but a total evolution. An evolution that must be justified because it's a true sequel that not only deserves more, but gave more than anybody anticipated. Are you seriously suggesting that Code Veronica was entirely pointless? After all of that build-up from the first and second installments? After all of that suffering that Chris and Claire went through, and finally managed to reunite, that somehow I'm supposed to forget it exists? You cannot convince me that this wasn't an important story, because this is the type of Resident Evil game that you've been begging for after the second trilogy. So in conclusion, I don't want anybody that actually cares about this franchise to completely deny its existence. If anybody from Capcom sees this, I want to tell you how I want this game remade. Because I don't want this to be forgotten. And I meant that I want this. The first major thing that I want you to do is completely ignore anything that you did in Darkside Chronicles. The changes made for that arcade on-rails shooting gallery was embarrassing. Whatever new information was created in that story is irrelevant. The second request following that is expanding the game's content. This also includes the replay value. Because there's no way in hell you are remaking this game with bare bones content. Which brings me to the third thing. I want this remake to be one of the hardest M-rated installments ever. When I say that I want more blood and gore, I'm not talking about just seeing blood splatter. I want decapitations back. But don't stop there. When characters are being attacked and killed, show us everything. Because removing both of those features completely undermined the entire point of the games being M-rated. Which brings me to the next thing that I want you to stop shying away from, which has existed in the series since the first installment. I think it's time to stop shying away from nudity. I don't mean that partially. I meant showing the entire human form without shying away from any particular body part. When Alexia has been awakened and regurgitated in human form, don't shy away from her body and leaving out intimate details, especially with her backside. Morons don't care about context, which therefore invalidates any reason to complain about it being implemented. And with the convenience of Steam allowing you to allow that type of uncut content, you have no reason to be restrained anymore. If during development you're forced to change or remove content, the PC market is your friend, and you'd still be making money from that separate version. So quit being cowards and take advantage of that, even if the accessibility requires DLC with such content. There's no restrictions as long as you're legit. My last request is simple. It's one of the easiest to do. This shouldn't even be a request. But after over 20 years of this, I refuse to pass up this opportunity. Without hesitation, please bring Stephanie Penicello back as Claire. If Stephanie isn't Claire Redfield in Code Veronica Remake, there isn't anybody else that I will accept as her. There's too much unseen potential that she needs to fulfill as this character. I'm also aware that there's fans out there that deeply want Allison Court back. But her time has come and passed. It's time to move on. I appreciated her performance too, but it's time somebody else embodied her. I hope what I said was not only very informative, but also encouraging. Because as soon as this remake is announced and finalized, I guarantee you I will be playing this game. But until that time happens, if it ever happens, hopefully, this was the Venturous Gamer, and I hope you've enjoyed your Venturous experience.
I swear I'll never stop protecting you, Claire.